Welcome back, CSE230, to part 2 of ex2 lists and links CSS. Now we're using ex1, but it's really ex2 because we're doing the CSS, because in ex1 we didn't do any CSS, but we're using the same file. So we used some CSS here to center our body content, to change the background color of the HTML, to change the background color of the body. We're going to change the background color of the footer and change the spacing a little bit on the footer. We're going to change the fonts a little bit, the line spacing a little bit, and that's about it. That's all we should have to do here, and at least for starting out with CSS. So what I mentioned next we might do is let's look at the footer a little. We'll give it a blue color and we'll kind of center things down there so that way we can target the footer separately. So we're going to go down here and target the footer, and I'm going to put it at the bottom because that's the last thing in our HTML. And I'm going to give it a background color first because that'll be the first thing we see. Now if we go to color names here, you could look through for blues and look for light sky blue or something like that. Or you could use the color picker and do that. I'll try light sky blue and see how that looks. That way I have color names on my page and I'll kind of remember that, I guess. And remember, it's background color. So I'm going to choose background color, colon, put light sky blue, semicolon, and I'll save it. And I'll go back here and I'll see what my footer looks like. I'll see what the spacing is because I don't have any spacing around it right now. So what I want to do here, I guess, is, now that's what's odd is we have padding. Where do we have our padding? Our padding's on section. We have no padding on footer. So let's put some padding on footer and see what happens here. And I'd probably want, I think, the same. I may not want the same all around, but let's just try 24 pixels and see what it looks like. So I'm going to put padding, 24 pics, and I'll save it and see what it looks like. And there it is. Now, it's probably too much on the top and bottom, but I want it lined up there. So how do I reduce it on just the top and bottom? And that's where we can do padding left, padding right, or here's a little shortcut. Instead of putting different ones for all of them, we could still use padding, but here's a little trick. It's something called trouble. Just remember those letters, trouble, T-R-B-L. That means the order that these go in is top, right, bottom, left. And it's top, right, bottom, left. It goes clockwise, starting at 12 o'clock. Top, right, bottom, left. And it spells out trouble. So that's all you have to remember is trouble. So in the top, instead of having it 24, let's put it at 12. And then you could just do a space. You won't put commas in here. And then after the top, you're going to go to the trouble to the right. On the right, it doesn't really matter what we have over there. So that could be 12 again. So I'll just put 12. And then it goes to the bottom, which I also want 12. And then on the left, we want 24 because we want it lined up with all these. We want these 12 over here, it doesn't matter, 12 down here, and we want 24 over here. So that way I can put 24 here. And this is an easier way, not easier, I wouldn't say it's easier, but instead of putting 4 lines and putting a padding top, padding left, you could do that, but this kind of gathers it all together. And then if I do that, it should give me what I'm looking for down here, and I have a nice little footer that's kind of independent of what's going on. Now the color's a little dark, could make it lighter, although it picks up kind of the bottom part of that. And that looks okay so far. And what I'll do next is I'll adjust the fonts a little bit. These are all serif fonts, like a Times New Roman. I'm going to change it to a sans serif, and I'm going to change it to everything first, including down here, because usually sans serif fonts look better on screen. So I'm going to do that in the body, because everything in the body has the fonts. So I'll put it here, and actually there's an extra space here, and I'm going to do something called font family. And you basically choose a list of fonts that you want in that particular order if they have it. And eventually I'll show you how to use Google Fonts and, use special fonts. But right now we're just going to assume we're going to use what people have on their computer, which, is going back to the 2000s when everybody designed everything with Arial and Times New Roman and stuff like that because that's what everybody had. We're not going to have to stick with that, but just for now, we'll just change it. And I'll put Calibri and I'll put a comma. And then I'll put Arial because that's real common, and then a comma, and then I'll put sans, and sans serif should come up as a choice. and I'll put a semicolon. Now these are names, that's why they're not getting in purple, because that's not, true CSS. They're custom names. Keep in mind, if you have a name like Times New Roman that has a couple words, or Arial Black or something like that, Comic Sans, again, don't use Comic Sans. But if you did, you'd have to put quotes around it. But these do not need quotes around it. Calibri is kind of that office one, so that's what I have in there right now. So this should change everything to that font. And there it is. Now everything's in a sans serif font. Now it doesn't mean it looks fantastic or anything. Actually, this looked better probably in a nice heading font, so I could still kind of pick that out and kind of override that. So I could go here, because remember that they kind of cascade, so the deeper you go into it, you could be more specific. So I could go here and put an H1 and say font family, and this time I'll use serif fonts. I'll use Georgia, which is a nice bold font. I'll just use that, comma, and I'll just put serif, whatever the default serif is. I'll worry about fonts later, but right now I'll put that in there, and I'll even put a color. Now, you don't put font color. If you start typing font, you're looking for font color, you won't see it. It's actually color. And I'll just go look for kind of a more of a reddish color. So I'll scroll here, look for some reds, kind of fall red kind of stuff. That's an orange red. I guess that's okay. Or if you want to go up to the very top, you can go to the picker, and that way you could pick out any color you want. You don't have to just pick out the ones with the name. So you could go in here, and if you want more of like a fallish kind of reddish color, you want it darker, you could pick up something a little more browner, whatever you want. A little more, I'll get a little more red, a little deeper red, something like that, and I'll copy it. Then you can just copy the hex number, and that's right here. Now you have to put the pound sign, then it'll turn purple, and put the semicolon at the end, and I'll save this, save the CSS file, and refresh it, and that looks nice. Although it's too small, so I need to make it bigger. How do I make it bigger? Well, I could do font size. They do have font size. There's font size. Now, what font size would you use? Would you just start choosing numbers? What I'll do for right now is I'll use percents for now, because that's kind of a relative thing. I'll put like 160%. See how that looks. And it's a little bit bigger. Let me make it double. I'll put 200% right now. And we'll talk about M's, we'll talk about percents, all that kind of stuff, but we don't have to get into it right now. We just want it bigger. And if you want to make it any bigger than that, but that looks okay. And if I wanted to make these things green, I could just go find some kind of green color. As long as I'm doing colors here, I guess I could go find a green. I could even go back to names, HTML color names, and look for greens and find kind of a nice dark khaki. That looks okay, although that's not really in the green. How about this olive drab or olive? I think they look okay. I'll use olive. I'll just use the hex number of olive, doesn't matter. But if you wanted to remember which one you were doing, actually, if you wanted to remember which one you were using, choosing the name, that's kind of helpful if that helps you. If you're going to go back and change it and say, well, I want it lighter. So I could put that in the H2s. And I need to put color, remember just color, and a colon, and put my semicolon, and we'll see how that looks with the olive color. Oh wow, that looks fantastic. And what I'll do next is just spread out the line spacing just a little bit. Now I actually want to spread out the line spacing, not of everything, but just of this paragraph, this list, and this list. Now what we could do, because you think, well, how do I just pick that and that without doing the line spacing of everything? Well, you can actually go into here, and basically you want to target the P that's in the section element, and you want to target the line items that are in the section element. And I'm saying it like that because that's how you actually write it. You can go back to your CSS, and I'll put this before footer because it doesn't have to be, footer's kind of the last thing. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to target section. Now I'm targeting the element, and then I'm targeting the P inside it, and then I'll put a comma, and I'm targeting the LIs inside it. And then I'm still going to do my curly braces, and I'm just going to put line height. And if you start typing line and do height and a colon, I'm going to put 150%. I'll see what that looks like. I have a feeling this isn't going to change a whole lot. So I'm going to put 150%. And when I refresh it, I'll see if that changes. Oh, that's perfect. That looks good. And really, that's all I really want for now. That's all you really have to do for ex2, is just work with those couple things. Now, if it's not exactly, I'm not going to go pick out that you use the exact same colors. If you use different colors, that's fine. Although I'd try to use colors that are in the picture, that would look better. And eventually we'll talk about, changing up pictures and editing things and stuff like that. This looks pretty good right now. That color pulls out from there. These colors pull out from there. The blue pulls out from the bottom. You could always make it a little bit lighter at the bottom, but that's all I really want now for ex2, is just doing some CSS. Now let's look at this again. We used a reset that we took from that book, that online book, and pasted it in there and just took off the font stuff, because I just left some of the font sizes in there. Now we could have wiped them out and did something to start with. And remember, these are CSS comments, and we don't have a whole lot of CSS in here. We have HTML, which has a background color, which is Navajo white. We have body, which is corn silk, which is a little bit lighter. We set a width. We set a margin auto so that the whole body is centered on the page. And we set all the fonts to be a sans serif font like Calibri and Arial, except for the H1. We put padding in the section area in here, but we didn't want padding on the header. That's why we didn't put it on the body. So just the section area has the padding. And then we put a custom padding down here on the footer. So there's our H1. We have the Georgia font. We made it bigger. We don't have to make it bold because it is bold by default. We gave it a color of that kind of tomato-ish red fall color. Our H2s have a padding up at the top, meaning it's like a space before. So this space in here and space here is the padding top on those H2s. So every H2 has padding top. And our OLs and ULs have a margin left of 18. That brought them in so that the bullets and the numbers line up underneath the words. Now you can customize the space in between here, all that kind of stuff you could do. But for now, that looks fine. The footer, we gave a background color, and we customized the padding so that there was more padding on the left and a little bit of padding all around. So there's only 12 all around, and there's 24 on the left side, so that it lines up with all this stuff here, which looks good. And I think that's it. I put green color here. Let's see what else we did. So there's not a whole lot there, but we learned to do a couple things. We learned to target elements inside elements here. We targeted the P and the LIs inside of section, and we targeted multiple elements. Here we targeted the OL and the UL, and I think that's about it. We used some comments, we put multiple declarations, we used some color names. I don't know if we used any color hex colors, but we used color names from our color names list, and I went to htmlcolorcodes.com. I have a link for that on your documents and resources, and that's it. And when you're done with this, that's all you need to do is make sure you save both of these, and you can close them as long as they're saved. And again, all you're really doing is modifying index and creating in styles.css, and this you can close, I guess, once you're done. And then you just have to go into ex2, and you just have to go into ex2 and just make a comment saying complete, just like people did for ex1. Make sure you do that. So that's ex2, kind of introducing CSS a little bit. We're going to be doing a lot more with CSS, but that's just kind of a start, just to take what we did the first time around and kind of modify it so you could see what HTML does and what CSS does. And you can close up your page that opened up. You could go into here and you can close your container. You don't have to sign out of GourmIDE, but you can close your container, and then you can just close your tabs that you have there and just go into My Warren, go into the ex2, and just indicate in comments that it's complete, and then I'll be able to go and check it out as long as I have your shared link.